Hello, welcome back to LT Gaming everyone, my name is Tom, and yes, we are still two gaming obsessed brothers who have basically spent the last few days locked in a fierce debate over this list like it was a matter of national importance. Sleep was lost, tea went cold and lines were drawn. But a quick one before we get stuck in: if you do enjoy proper gaming coverage, rankings, deep dives, all of the good stuff, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and chuck us a like on the video if it ends up being your sort of thing. It genuinely helps the channel more than you would think. Right, so this isn't just my favourite Total War games or what I played when I was 15. We really wanted to tackle this one like we do our other ranking lists and look at how each game landed at launch, what happened after launch, and I'm talking patches, expansions, the mod scene, community fixes, and then the bigger question: what was the legacy? What actually left a mark on Total War and gaming as a whole, without just having nostalgia tinted glasses on at the same time? So the criteria is going to be pretty simple. We're going to weigh up three things. Firstly, the core experience at launch. How was the campaign? Did the battles feel good? Did it launch in a proper state? Secondly, what happened afterwards, because with Total War, the game you remember at launch is not the same one 2 years later. So here we'll take a look at expansions and of course the unsung heroes, the community, through mods and fixes. And thirdly, lasting impact. Did this one push the series forward, set a new standard, or did it become a template everyone else just copied? And lastly, I do love debate in gaming. I genuinely think we don't do it enough without it turning into this weird space. So don't be shy, drop your own rankings below in the comments. Luke and I will be going through them with a fine-tooth comb. And don't worry, I expect a bit of brutality. Alright though, enough of that stuff, let's get into it. Right, kicking it off at the bottom. So I gotta say, Thrones of Britannia isn't a bad game, that's the important bit. It's actually quite tidy in places, the setting is fun, the map is focused, and it's got this small wars, messy borders vibe that is perfect for Total War. But here's the problem: it never quite earns that one more turn addiction. The campaign systems feel a bit slimmed down, and not in this clever streamlined way, more in a wait, is that it way. You're playing a Total War that's deliberately smaller in scope, and that can work, but it also means each system needs to be sharp, and for me it just didn't have the bite I was looking for. Battles are fine, but they don't have the signature flavour that makes you think, yep, only Thrones does this. And a franchise this big, it's basically faint praise. If we're being honest about legacy, it didn't hold up in the long run. Not a massive DLC arc, not a huge mod platform movement, not a big cultural footprint. It's more like a historical side note, interesting, contained, but a bit forgotten. So yeah, I'm putting Thrones of Britannia at 16 not because it is a disaster, but because compared to the rest of the series, it just doesn't leave that same lasting mark. Alright, 15 is Troy, and I'll be honest, it's better than the meh reputation it sometimes carries around, but I'm not one of these people who also put it at the A tier of games either. It is trying to do something genuinely different and smart with its resource economy. You didn't just stack gold and pretend logistics weren't a thing. You had to trade and raid and actually care what a province produced. And it gave the campaign a nice bit of texture, and it makes diplomacy feel less like just menu clicking. Thematically, it also had that heroic Bronze Age energy, not full fantasy chaos, not pure dry history either. And if you did want to go properly mythic, the Mythos expansion said, here, have your monsters as well. And I think a lot of people were far warmer on that direction than they were with just the base game's half-myth approach. Now what holds it back is it never fully commits to what it wants to be. It's sat in this in-between space. The kind of truth behind the myth on one side and then proper mythic madness on the other, and the base game feels like it's hedging its bets. People say it was uneven, and the campaign, although it has clever ideas, it does wobble a bit. And many people called out the AI difficulty and weirdness in the mid-game. Now the big story with this one is it was free on Epic, and it got claimed over 7.5 million times, which gives it a huge amount of people who actually own this game, but it seemed unable to convert them into full-blown converts. Right, 14 is Total War Pharaoh, and a bit of controversy. It's the sort of Total War where the pitch was brilliant, the foundation was and then you just tripped over a pile of very specific annoyances. On the good side, the whole Bronze Age collapse angle was a lot of fun. It gave the campaign some pressure, unrest, famine, things just unraveling, and this vibe of everything's held together very flimsily energy. You had chariots, composite bows, and it should have been properly atmospheric. But the objections here are pretty consistent. Loads of people bounced off the limited unit variety and a map that felt too narrow for a mainline scale ask. Critics and players called the game bland in places, and there were a lot of gripes about the interface, which is a complete cancer for a Total War game, and progression didn't really land. And if you zoom out, the reception really reflects this mixed vibe. Steam is in mixed territory and Metacritic lands at 74. However, I do respect that they didn't pretend nothing was wrong. There was a permanent price drop, refunds, and a promise to deliver paid content for free. And that's what we got with the Dynasties update, and it is genuinely chunky. A bigger map, new cultures, loads of units, new mechanics, and basically here's what people wanted at launch. So yeah, number 14, not hopeless, not broken I would say, but it's a game that's earning its spot rather than instantly owning it. So yeah, the summary here is lost potential I would say. Alright, number 13, Shogun Total War, the one where it all begins. This is the original, hang on, you're telling me I can run a clan on the turn-based map, then fight the battle in real time? Sign me up. It was focused, cohesive, and it's got that early Total War restraint. War first, admin later, and that's a big part of why it worked. And I gotta be honest, Luke and I have a ridiculous soft spot for it. Our computer at the time could barely cope, like it technically ran, but half the time it wouldn't even render the units, so instead of samurai we just had these little black boxes sliding across the battlefield. But even then we were absolutely hooked, which tells you everything you need to know about how strong this core idea was. But it is a victim of time. The UI is clunky now, it's finicky on modern systems, and it doesn't have the massive community overhaul scene that later games benefited from. I gotta say, everyone's pretty good on this game, everyone respects it, critics and players alike. And honestly, my nostalgia glasses wanted to put this higher, they were screaming at me. But my inner modern gamer fought back and stood firm. So yeah, 13, historically massive, still weirdly lovable. Once you've played the later classics, it's hard not to feel the age or find a reason to go back to it. Alright, number 12, Medieval Total War. This is where Total War stops being that brilliant little Japan experiment and suddenly goes big. You've got medieval Europe spilling into North Africa and the Middle East, crusades on the horizon, religion and politics in the mix. It genuinely feels like the series grew up with this title. It's a proper step forward from Shogun. There's a ton more to manage on the campaign layer. You had longer term planning, battles that lent into the era's strengths like heavy cavalry and fortifications, and just this delicious medieval chaos. It went big too, it landed well, reviewed well, and it's remembered as the game that proved Total War wasn't a one-hit wonder. So why isn't it higher? Mostly because it does show its age in ways that the later classics don't. Campaign presentation does feel dated, learning curve is quite tough if you're coming back to it from modern games, and it feels like you're fighting the interface as much as the enemy. The expansion Viking Invasion is genuinely a nice little extra chapter, tighter British Isles focus, more flavour and a lot of variety without needing 100 hours. And then there was the mod scene. It was early days, more tweaks and experiments than the massive overhauls that you'll see later, so its legacy is less community driven. I think that's important. It's more where the franchise found its feet, particularly with the scale it was going for. So yes, important, influential, but undeniably from another era. Right, number 11, Total War Attila. The game's whole personality is about collapse. You're not building a shiny empire, you're trying to survive an era of famine, migration, and the sort of pressure that turns every safe province into a future problem. It's grim in the best way. Razing things to the ground actually matters, horde factions change the rules of the map, and the campaign constantly feels like it's slipping out of your hands. Design wise, it's like a very atmospheric version of Rome 2. But it's also the reason plenty of people bounced off. The campaign is brutal, and it very much feels like winning is earned rather than inevitable. Throw in a reputation for some rough optimization, throw in siege and settlement battles where the pathfinding was less than stellar, and you've got a Total War game that's just harder to get into. Now, the funny part with this game is there's a huge chunk of the community who don't even rate it as a vanilla game anymore. They buy it basically as a mod platform. There's a plethora of really stellar mods for this game, and I gotta say it's something I haven't got into. If I had, I might rank this game much higher. So yeah, it's number 11, I respect it, but it's prickly, punishing campaign design, some technical grumblings, but a lot of players have truly fallen in love with this one once the mods get involved. Right, number 10, Empire Total War. Now this one was properly contested between Luke and I pushed for it to be higher, he wanted it about at 10, and I think upon reflection it is fair when you remember what it was like at launch. Because the idea of Empire is still outrageous. A proper global campaign, multiple theatres, trade routes that actually matter, colonial wars, naval battles, and suddenly you had a game that was an absolute beast on paper, because it was a fantasy that hardly any other Total War attempts, and certainly no other game. But launch reputation is earned, and early on it crashed. Dodgy AI, pathfinding issues. I remember huge community bug threads almost immediately. But this is where the mod scene matters. Empire is one of the Total Wars where the definitive experience for a lot of people is Empire plus mods. Smoothing the rough edges, improving battles, or even doing total conversions. So yeah, it had unmatched scope, naval warfare, and an era that Total War doesn't really do anywhere else at this scale. The cons were it was inconsistent, and it needed the community's help to become the version that people talk about fondly and the version that I was talking about. Honestly, I think Empire is the series at its most ambitious to date, for better and worse. Right, at number 9, Total War Warhammer 3, and this one's here because it's the trilogy's grand finale that didn't land cleanly out of the gate. At launch, you weren't getting the giant sandbox most people expected, you got the Realm of Chaos story campaign. And the core idea is bold, rifts open, you dive into Chaos Realms, and you race around to collect Demon Prince souls. Some people connected with the narrative push, but me and many others found it a bit repetitive and honestly a little bit intrusive. It felt like the game was grabbing the steering wheel from you. Then there was the technical wobbles, bigger maps, new siege mechanics with barricades and multiple capture points, and loads of those minor settlement fights, and I mean loads. And the AI wasn't always that optimal either. You throw in big performance issues with some rigs, and it was a bumpy first impression for many. Now I do think the good stuff was properly good, the launch factions were fantastic, but the game lacked a real identity. But that arrived in Immortal Empires, launched as a beta back in August 22, which is that all three games become one absurdly massive campaign moment, and the reception notably shifted because it was hugely fun and frankly surprisingly stable for the scale. Post-launch it's also been a proper roller coaster, DLCs being overpriced and causing a big backlash. Now CA eventually did do the rare thing and openly acknowledged this and promised changes, and that steadied the ship somewhat. Mods are thriving though, and the toolkit has let a lot of old favourites carry forward. But why number 9? Well, in terms of important, it was enormous, it delivers unprecedented trilogy as one giant game concept, and by 26 it is basically the definitive Warhammer Total War platform. But it is also the entry where that greatness came with a lot of baggage, a lot of decisiveness at launch, and I am glad it got there because it is genuinely excellent now. But part of ranking this franchise is being honest about the road it took to get there, and you can see this one's bumpier road in its reviews, which overall are still mixed on Steam. Right, number 8, Total War 3 Kingdoms, and this one is genuinely painful to place because based upon pure campaign design, I think it's one of the most modern and confident Total Wars ever made. At launch, it was a proper flex for them. Gorgeous presentation, this character-driven warlord drama, a pretty well fleshed out diplomacy system that feels like actually negotiating, and then this romance versus record split where you could go full heroic legend with duels, or keep it more grounded if you wanted the grit. And commercially, it absolutely landed. Over 1 million copies shifted in its first week, fastest selling in the series. So based upon all that, why haven't I put it higher? Firstly, there was a lot of critique, and I agree with this, that the gameplay feels off once the novelty wore off. The campaign AI was weirdly aggressive and messy, lots of wars and never much coordination. Then there was unit variety, compared to others it just felt like you were playing the same faction often. And then the romance mode was also divisive. Some people love the power fantasy, but others feel the heroes are too dominant and it throws the balance and historical tone off. And the post-launch story is where the real bruise sits with this one. The DLC path just always felt disconnected from the core famous characters' appeal. And then, what the hell, CA, you just ended support back in 21, and it left a really bitter taste for many people, because I, like many others, still felt the game was carrying unresolved issues. So yeah, number 8. brilliant campaign foundation, I can't critique the launch impact either, but it gets knocked down because of the post-launch support, which left players feeling like it was just slightly unfinished, to be honest. Right, number 7, Total War, Warhammer now. And this is the moment that the series basically said, right, we're doing Warhammer now everyone, and somehow it made it work. Legacy wise, I think it's hard to overstate what this did. It was the big pivot from history into fantasy, and it landed with some proper confidence. Distinct factions with genuinely weird rules, magic, flying units, legendary lords who could bully whole regiments if you weren't careful. And I gotta highlight, I think they did an absolutely fantastic job at making the factions very distinct and like the rule textbooks. Now, some people didn't connect with this side, and this is where the downsides begin. It did have a more arcadey vibe when compared back to the historical games. So heroes deleting units and spells flattening your beautiful battle lines. I think that's par for the course with the Warhammer universe, but some felt it diminished the tactical purity. Then there were the sieges. Yep, one of the big reasons I can't rate this higher. They were simpler and much more repetitive than the older games. And yes, there was a significant amount of content bloat here. It felt like you were buying a brilliant starter kit and then discovering the rest of your hobby lives in the DLC aisle. Thanks for inventing that model paradox. Now, the bit that keeps this so high is what the community did with it. It's the era where Total War's mod scene finds its feet, loads of quality of life packs, balance tweaks, new units, and then big headline overhauls like SFO that made it much more grittier, slower, and punishing. So yeah, number 7, historically massive and a huge shift for the franchise, ridiculously fun, but it lands here because some of the things in the game were a bit thin, so it's the foundation of the Warhammer era, not the most complete version of it. Right, number 6, Napoleon Total War, and one of Luke's favourite of the series. He fought hard for it to be in this place. This was basically Creative Assembly looking at Empire Total War and going, okay, same era, but this time we'll make the game behave properly. The big win with Napoleon is focus. Instead of trying to model half the planet, it narrows in on the Napoleonic campaigns, Italy, Egypt, and the big European push. And it's not juggling this global circus, everything just feels tighter. The battles are proper gunpowder spectacle, musket lines, cannons, weather rolling in, uniforms looking sharp, and most crucially, it launched in a much better state than Empire did. Stable, smoother, better optimized, and the AI simply less prone to doing something that makes you go, what the hell is going on here? It also does something a bit different structurally. You're not dumped into a sandbox and told good luck with this mate. It's a much more curated historical flavour to the campaigns, and it really suits the era. Now, the downsides and why is kept at 6. The scope cut is a double-edged sword. It is more coherent, but you do lose that grand globe-spanning madness that Empire goes for. And because it's aiming for a more curated experience, it doesn't have the same write your own history for the next 300 turns energy that I associate with the top echelon of this series. Mods are really good too. You got Darth mod, for example, if you want bigger battles, sharper behaviour. So the community is doing what it does, stretching the engine into things it was never meant to be. There's a really cool Great War total conversion as well that turns it into World War I. It's not just a fun extra, it's part of why Napoleon is still relevant. So yeah, number 6, it's the most polished, easiest to recommend slice of gunpowder Total War. Less chaos than Empire, but more bite than you would expect. Right, number 5, Total War Rome II. And yes, this is where half of you are going to go, how dare you put it that high? And the other half will go, finally someone's saying it. Because Rome 2 has 2 lives, the launch life and the game it eventually became. At release, it was a messier conversation than it had any right to be. Performance issue, odd AI moments, systems that didn't work, and in a general sense that the ambition got ahead of the polish. And the first impression absolutely matters, and I'm not pretending that it didn't happen. But if you judge Rome 2 by what people actually play now, the patched up version with years of support behind it, I think it could be one of the best that CA has ever shipped. Huge maps, loads of factions, loads of variety, and a genuinely ridiculous amount of content. It's a sort of Total War where you can do a whole campaign as a minor faction, sink in several hundred turns and come away thinking, right, let's try that again. Battles are classic Rome era spectacle, heavy infantry lines flanking, cavalry doing cavalry things, sieges are still Total War sieges, but it is a game that's letting you play your own story. And then there is the mod scene, and it's a massive part of why it's here. For a lot of players, the definitive Rome 2 experience is basically Rome 2 plus overhaul mods. There's all sorts out there that change the pace, deepen the systems, and make it feel like a crazy, serious historical campaign that the people wanted from day one. So why number 5? Well, in terms of legacy, it's both a cautionary tale and a redemption story, and the finished version is simply too big, too replayable, too community shaped for me to ignore. It doesn't crack the top because the launch scars and the rough edges were real, but as a historical Total War, it really is the complete package players are looking for now. Right, number 4 is Rome Total War, and this one is what I felt turned Total War from a clever strategy series into a proper cultural event. The breakthrough was fully 3D armies, a free roaming campaign map, and battles that felt cinematic in a way the genre just wasn't doing at the time. War elephants, phalanx walls, chaos in battles. This was the first Total War where you'd show a mate a battle and they go, wait, this is what gaming is now? It got big enough that even channels like the History Channel were using it as an engine to visualize battles, which is absolutely mad when you think about it. Now, it's not perfect, and that's why it doesn't crack the top 3. The AI could be creative, let's say, in an unhelpful sense. Hardcore history types will also tell you it plays a bit too fast and loose with the accuracy, and if you boot it up today, you'll feel the age and the interface and flow, but I think the core is still brilliant. Where it really earns its spot is what it turned into. Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion gave you a darker, more desperate campaign, and introduced this horde migration flavour that later games would build on. Rome Total War Alexander was smaller, but a tight little historical sprint for those people who just wanted to conquer the world before your tea got cold, and then the mod scene happened. And a slew of different mods said, fine, I'm gonna rebuild antiquity myself, which is a big reason people, and myself included here, speak about with this slightly misty-eyed tone. So yeah, number 4, not the most modern feeling entry now, and maybe it was a bit finicky in terms of AI, but in impact, staying power, and the way it set the standard for what Total War could be and become, it absolutely earns its place near the top. Right, number 3, Total War Warhammer II. And this is the one where the Warhammer era goes from an interesting experiment to, okay, this is actually an obsession for me now. Because compared to the first game, Warhammer 2 feels like the fully realised version of the formula. The factions are wildly different, the campaign layer had more structure, you got a brilliant sense of the escalation where early scraps turn into a late game monster mash without losing any tactical clarity. It's also where this trilogy really started to feel like a platform rather than just a one-off game. The combined campaign idea becomes the default way people talk about it, and it massively boosts the replayability. Now it's not flawless, and I've had to nitpick, the base campaign can have its pacing quirks. And if you're the sort of player who hates being nudged by narrative objectives, you can still feel the rails a bit. And yeah, the main gripe for me is the DLC situation. It's a bit of a lifestyle choice, but the reason for me it's at number 3 is simple. This is the Warhammer Total War that is both deep and stable with years of tuning behind it. And the mod scene is enormous. Quality of life, balance passes, new units, overhauls, all giving you a completely different tone if you want something grittier, slower, and so on. It's the game that let people pick their preferred flavour of Warhammer. So yeah, number 3. It's not the first big moment like Warhammer 1, it's not the massive trilogy finale like 3, but in terms of how consistently good it is and how much of a game you got once everything's settled, Warhammer 2 for me is the sweet spot. Moving on to number 2, Total War Shogun 2. And this is where the series feel like it's been put through a polishing machine and handed back to you with a little bit of a bow on top. The magic of Total War Shogun 2 is focus, if I had to pick one word. One setting, one time period, one clear fantasy. Because it isn't trying to model half the planet, it clicks everything into place, the campaign has real pace, battles are crisp, and it's one of the few Total Wars where you spend more time thinking about moves and less time fighting the game itself. It's got this lovely, simple on the surface but very sharp underneath thing going on. You have very good unit rolls, tactics really matter, and it feels like the game makes you work for your wins in a positive way. And then there's the whole realm divide thing, which I actually respect as a design choice. It's basically the game saying, right, you're powerful now, but can you survive being the villain? Some people do hate it, and I think though for me it solves the classic late game problem that many Total Wars suffer from. Now, it's not perfect of course, but I'm not going to go on about all these little gripes I don't like. I would say that Realm Divide for some feels less like political realism and more like everyone simultaneously just hates you now because the script says so. If you're not ready for that pivot, it can be a bit of a mood killer. And then you've got Total War Shogun II, Fall of the Samurai, which for me is basically the mic drop moment. It takes the same clean core and adds industrial era chaos, guns, artillery, modernization pressure, and is so good it feels like it could be a separate top tier Total War in its own right. Oh wait, yeah, I forgot, they actually did do that. They separated this away as its own standalone game, but I'm treating it as one. I don't want to get too much into the controversy, but yeah, I don't think Creative Assembly's finest moment there. And yes, Shogun 2 also has a proper healthy mod scene, the kind that feels it improves the game without turning it into a big science project, so kudos there too. So to summarise, for me, it's one of the cleanest, most consistently enjoyable Total War packages ever made, and probably one of the best intros into this series for new players as well. Number 1, to maybe a few people's surprise, is Medieval Total War 2. I won't pretend, Luke and I kept circling back saying this has to go top. Interestingly, me and Luke only ever had one online battle against each other. We're pretty competitive, and he absolutely crushed me in it. He was a lot more experienced at the time, but I gotta give him credit for that because he says I never do. Alright, Medieval Total War is the purest version of what Total War does best. A big moody campaign map, where every border feels like an argument and a fight waiting to happen, and the battles still give you that little shiver when the lines meet. It has scale, it has atmosphere, and it's got that medieval, everyone smiling while sharpening a knife behind their back political vibe, even making peace times feel tense. And when you add in Medieval 2 Kingdoms, it's basically 4 extra campaigns stapled on: Crusades, Britannia, Teutonic and Americas, and it goes from being a great game to a whole era of strategy gaming in just one install. But the real reason it sits at number 1 is because of what happened afterwards. This isn't just a game people fondly remember, it's a game people still build on to this day. It became the series' proper modding kingdom. Huge historical overhauls, fantasy conversions, total reworks that feel like separate releases. The community didn't just keep it alive, they made it a platform. Now, I've thrown shots at every game in this list, and so it is worth saying you are playing a game that's 25 plus years old, and it means you're going to hit moments where the campaign is a bit all over the place, sieges go a bit all over the place, but the difference is with Medieval 2 you forgive it, because the campaign mood and replayability are so strong that you immediately start planning your next run while you're still finishing the current one. So yeah, number 1. Not the newest, not the slickest, but if we're ranking Total War on legacy, impact, expansions and community, it's what people keep coming back to year after year, and quite fittingly, it is the king. Alright, there we have it. That is my ranking, and now it is your turn to fight me in the comments as much as you would like. And honestly, I only do ranking videos for series that are properly epic, so to be frank, pretty much everything on this list, bar maybe 1 or 2, I still think is stellar and help push strategy gaming forward. A lot of the controversy with Total War is less about the games at their best and more about launches, patches, and how Creative Assembly handle things at different points. But credit where it is due, they absolutely built a dynasty that both Luke and I genuinely adore. Now we look to the future. Give us Total War Warhammer 40,000, give us Medieval Total War 3, and let's hope whatever comes next can live up to this phenomenally chaotic, brilliant series. Cheers for watching, drop your own rankings below. Bye bye now.